Hi, everyone. Welcome to Off the Podium. I have Øystein Baadsvik. I hope I got that right after a few tries before we started recording. Welcome to Off the Podium.
Thank you so much. It was perfect.
How are you dealing with the current times? I mean, I know how you're dealing because I've been following your career and following you on online, but how are you dealing with the current situation? What are you doing currently?
Yeah, so I'm not employed anywhere. I'm a 100% freelancer, which means that I sort of depend on the gigs that I have in my calendar. And at the moment, the gigs are just disappearing as dew in the morning sun. I had a packed calendar from January up until, well, pretty much the rest of the year, but now all of the gigs are gone by September, up until September. And most likely it'll just continue to be cancellations. And a lot of arrangers, fortunately, they say they'll move the gig to a future date, which is good. But then again, I can't do another gig on that date, so it's kind of canceled anyway.
Yeah.
So I mean, the key to surviving this is, of course, you've got to find yourself something to do so you don't go nuts from just being around your four walls of your home and your tuba all the time, and my wife, obviously. And then there is the financial thing. I mean, how do you deal with it financially? This is a serious thing for a lot of freelancers that depend on your next gig next week, for example. Yeah. So fortunately, I have a combination of low costs and some money in the mattress, and that sort of makes me going. But yeah, it's tough days.
Yeah. I've had a couple of guests on my podcast who've sort of been, and I rarely use this, but revolutionary in their fields. For example, I had Evelyn Glennie. For those who don't know, she's a world famous percussionist. She's one of the first percussionists to, really start a career as a solo percussionist. No one, I think, before her had done that. And you're in that category to start a career as a tuba player, because even musicians who think of tuba or trombone or any of the instruments that are not the violin, cello, and piano, think of the most important players as people who play in, the Chicago Symphony or the Berlin Philharmonic. But you've made a career as a solo tuba player, and I'm sure, and the chamber musician, I'm sure many people have asked you this, but how do you even come up with the idea, or how do you even start a career as a solo tuba player?
Yeah, good question. And I think if that's the idea I started with, I would have, dismissed it right away. The reason is that if you look at the possibilities that exist for being a solo tuba player, I mean, it isn't a gig. Like for Evelyn Glennie, there wasn't something called full-time percussion soloist. And for me also, there was nothing like a full-time tuba soloist. There has been tuba soloists around, like Harvey Phillips, Roger Bobo, John Fletcher. All these guys were fantastic players, but they all played in orchestras as their main gig. And that's a huge difference. So you kind of put all your eggs in one basket and go from there. Now, my initial goal wasn't really to end up where I'm now, but it was more like, because I couldn't see so far in the future back then. But what I could do is I could really play music that I love to play. I could pursue, how can I put it, melody playing on the tuba. I could try to learn from people that I admired within the jazz department, within folk music, within Baroque period, and sort of pick up the different styles of those guys and put that into my own playing. So it wasn't really career driven. It was more like a love for music. Yeah. And that just happened to be possible to live from.
Yeah. So I had Roger Bobo on actually on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we talked a little bit about repertoire, but you've greatly contributed to the repertoire of tuba. What did it look like? And when I think of repertoire, it's great that pieces are performed once, but it'll be even better if it's, it becomes part of the repertoire where orchestras actually, or recite, people, students and other professionals continue to play that, not just once, but many, many times. What are some important pieces for tuba that are regularly performed now, that are, that came to life maybe over the past 30 years or so?
Let me see here. Off the bat, you have Landscape by Torbjörn Lundqvist. This was commissioned by Michael Lind, one of my former teachers in Stockholm. Beautiful piece for tuba and strings that I recorded with the Singapore Symphony back in 2006, I believe. And there is, let me see, of the more, you had the Gregson tuba concerto, also performed quite a bit. The Juan Williams was, of course, composed much earlier, but then you have the John Williams, which was composed, I believe, in 1986, and it's a huge hit, performed everywhere and a lot of occasions. Yeah. Then I have played actually a piece by my wife called New Kid that has become a hugely popular piece that is played. It's tuba and piano, and it's one of the most popular pieces of the publisher that publishes them, the Cimarron Music. Mm. So that's really fun, and I think there is actually an advantage to writing for tuba. Mm-hmm. If you write for violin, there are libraries full of fantastic music going back for centuries. Yeah. Now, even if you come up with a real good one, you have to compete against Mozart, Tchaikovsky, Bach, all of these phenomenal composers. Now, if you write for tuba, there is not much competition. And I'm not sure if that outweighs the performing possibilities, but you see that even modern tuba pieces are actually quite frequently played. So yeah, this is a little tip for composers that are listening.
So you mentioned some of the great composers. As a tuba player, do you ever think, I really wish this composer composed for tuba, but tuba wasn't around? But is there one composer that you just say, I wish that person wrote for tuba?
Actually, I saw a post today on Facebook, and I totally agree. Shostakovich would be phenomenal writing a tuba concerto, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're a composer, and tell me a little bit about your pieces, one of which is really a popular piece, but just as a composer, some of your highlights.
The most popular piece is definitely Fnugg. If you search for the word Fnugg, F-N-U-G-G, and tuba on YouTube, you'll find hundreds and hundreds of recordings. And I've done just a handful, like 30 maybe of those. So it's played a lot, and it's only tuba and singing. So you sing into the tuba, and you make some. It's hard to describe, really. Maybe you can play a part of it in your cast later on.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I was going to say, since you brought up that point, I know you've been instrumental in extended techniques for tuba, adding new things to the tuba. And I know it's probably tough to explain, but what are some of the things that you added, and where did that thought come from to even add these extended things on the tuba, not just notes?
Yeah, again, it's actually the same mechanism as being... thinking ahead as becoming a tuba soloist. That wasn't really in my head from the beginning. You might think that, you need to have a goal when you're going, but in this case, it was just playing around with having fun with different techniques on the tuba, see what I got amused from doing, and eventually try it out on concerts and see what the audience reacted to. And two of those most important things that are used in Fnugg is multiphonics with vowel change. So previously there has been a lot of multiphonics, and that is singing and playing at the same time through the tuba. But nobody actually thought of changing the vowel so that it becomes, maybe I can illustrate a little bit by going like this. It sounds almost a little bit like some people say it's didgeridoo-ish. Some people say it sounds like Tibetan throat singing. Some hear some Indian or a Native American music in there. So yeah, that's probably one of the most new parts of this. And then you have the lip beat, and that I can actually illustrate here. It's similar to doing how can I say like beatboxing, but on the tuba. So here we go. You start on tuku 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 tuku, and then you sort of do that into the tuba without voice, and you go. Something like this. And if you do that in the tuba, you get a really nice feeling of percussion almost. So that combined with this throat singing is pretty much a recipe for fnug.
Wow. And so, just to kind of throw it, go in a different direction with this conversation, I want to know what you listen to, because, people know you as a tuba player, sort of, if we were to put genres, classical genre, but what do you listen to? What's on your phone nowadays?
Well, to be honest, I don't listen a lot to music, but I have a few favorites. You have some old-time rock bands, for example. I love Queen. One of the first records I bought was Queen. An artist you might not have heard a lot about is Vangelis or Vangelis. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but he wrote this Chariots of Fire. That's probably his biggest hit. And then he wrote music to the Cosmos TV series, but he has done a lot of those synthesizer things back in the 70s, 80s. That's where he developed all of this, and it was just fantastic, I thought. I love to listen to Bruce Springsteen. He's one of those, how can I say, genuine artists. He seems really genuine, and that speaks to me a lot. These days, I also listen to my daughter. She calls herself Nia, and she has a band called Nia and the Regulars. I'm not sure why she calls her band the Regulars, but yeah, she has a band called Nia and the Regulars, and they're releasing stuff right now, and I enjoy that too.
Wow. So you sort of answered it with the, answering some music questions, but what is one thing or a couple of things that your fans, your followers don't know about you that you're willing to share with us today?
Oh, wow. That's a huge one. Well, what they don't know is that I enjoy making stuff. And that includes everything in music. I make CDs, I make concerts, I write music. But I also make other things. For example, I built this house that I'm sitting in right now with my own hands. And this is kind of my practicing studio.
Yeah.
I like to drive a small tractor around, digging holes, filling them with stuff. I built my wife a little outdoor toilet the other day.
Wow.
Yeah, and yesterday I built my son an outdoor gym, like welding together parts from an old trampoline. Wow. So yeah, I don't think that my fans know that. And I fly airplanes. I was out earlier today flying an airplane, which is as a pilot, and that's kind of my hobby.
Wow, and that's amazing. And you have a lot of energy. And thinking about all the things that you just said, I think of the tuba, because whether you're a musician or not a musician, you think of tuba and you think of someone who is first probably really well built, and also someone who just has a lot of energy to put into the instrument, a lot of air. And I've heard some of your master classes in the past, and you have great ideas. And I know that's probably a big topic, but just, what does it take to play a tuba? It's not just your face, it's your whole body, basically, isn't it?
You just said it.
Yeah.
You just said it, because the last 5-10 years, I've realized that it's all about using your entire body. there is so much you can harness from the weight of the body, the movement of the body. It's actually very similar to boxing. I had a master class once with a boxer. He was Norwegian champion, lightweight or featherweight boxer. And he said, in order to become a good boxer, you have to start the punch from your toes. And it sort of transcends all the way through your body and ends up on the end of the fist. And that stuck with me, but I didn't really, and that was about 30 years ago, but it didn't really, I didn't understand how I could do this on the tuba until just, I'd say about 5-10 years ago. And now I start teaching more and more how to not fight your body, which is really common, but actually to use your body while playing.
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned, teaching, I'm thinking about the future of tuba and the future of that specific instrument. And, for violinists, as we've talked about, and cellists and pianists, not many people think about these things because there's just millions of cellists and pianists and dozens of the world's famous ones. What is the future of tuba? What are some names? If you don't want to share names, you just talk about some of your students or people who you've worked with. And is there going to be someone on your level, Baadsvik, who's going to come in? Because when I asked Roger Bobo, he gave me your name and a couple other names. So I'm asking you now, as a younger generation than Roger Bobo, about the future.
Yeah, on a general base, I definitely think we'll see that the evolution will just keep on going, because now the bar is much higher, for example, on international competitions than it was only 10, 15 years ago. So I judge a lot of competitions internationally, and I can see the level is kind of growing every year. What was very common before, though, was that you had a couple of peaks, couple of people, maybe 2 or 3, that sort of stuck out, and there was a huge gap between those crazy guys on the top and the rest. But now the middle part, or the general level, is so high that there aren't any kind of super top players that stick out that I can think of. I mean, there's so many that can become phenomenal. So technically, I would say it's going to just keep on expanding technically, but it's all a question about who can come up with the best musical ideas, who can come up with ideas that people actually want to pay money to go listen to. And there, I think we can see development in jazz, for example, using the tuba in jazz, using it in pop music. There is a guy called Daniel Herskedal. He's a Norwegian jazz tuba player and composer that just wrote the music for one of Brad Pitt's latest movies. And I mean, he told me he got a phone call from Plan B Productions, which is Brad Pitt's production company. And they said, can you write music for, I think it was Last Man in Philadelphia, Last Man in San Francisco. I can't remember. I think it's something like that. And I mean, he was super surprised because he, first of all, he thought it was a joke, but he eventually understood, yeah, they're serious. And I think putting tuba in those kind of settings is really going to be the next big thing. I mean, we're kind of hit the ceiling when it comes to technical ability. We can play faster, but it's so hard to hear what you're doing if you're playing super fast on tuba. So I don't think that's the way to go, but expression, musical diversity, that's really where we're heading.
Yeah. And to be a soloist, especially on the tuba, one thing that, when listening to tuba and listening to you and some of the great tuba players, is that precise, clean playing. And this is, again, a big masterclass topic probably, but how do you even get to that point? What are some of your things that you rehearse and practice on a daily basis to get to that level of clean and precise playing?
It has to start with your goal. I mean, in this case, if you have a vision of a clear tuba sound, then that's what you're going to get eventually. But I think that vision lacks very often. I think a lot of the teaching that goes on is aimed at orchestral playing.
Mhm.
So first of all, people play on large gear. They play on quite large bore F tubas and E flat tubas. And the bigger the tuba, the muddier it sounds. That's pretty like consistent. And so first of all, we got to get rid of those large tubas. You see the one in the background here? That is my solo tuba, and it has a cylindrical valve section, which means all the valves are equally sized. And that's old-fashioned. Because nowadays, most of them are kind of expanding. So one is bigger than the other, and it's supposed to be more, well, a fatter sound. And sure enough, it is fatter. But this old-fashioned cylindrical system actually makes for a more clear sound. You can compare it to, if you compare a euphonium to a trombone, that's the difference you get.
Oh.
The trombone is a cylindrical instrument all the way through, and it's a lot clearer or crispier in the sound at least than the euphonium, which is cylindrical all the way. Oh, sorry, conical all the way. So it's not that the tuba is totally cylindrical, but part of it is cylindrical, and that helps. The bell on my tuba is normally smaller than the bell of another tuba, like the common tuba. Also, the silver on the outside of the tuba also adds to the crispness of the sound.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a tuba that is really clear is not going to be that fun to play on. And that sounds like a contradiction, but the thing is, when I play on this tuba, especially in the beginning when I got it, I felt, well, it's not such a nice, beautiful sound for me. But then I realized, sitting in the audience about 40 meters from me, it sounded fantastic. And after all, being a professional musician, you do have to sacrifice a little bit of your own experience on stage for the good of the audience, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. Choosing the right mouthpiece, the way you actually, the sound ideal that you have in your head is also really important. So yeah, there's a couple of different aspects there.
Well, for a world-class player like you, I'm sure many young musicians are thinking he probably practices, I don't know, 8 hours a day. But on a tuba, I mean, how long can you practice? How long did you practice when you were younger, and how long do you practice now?
Yeah, that's also something that a lot of fans might not know about me, that I don't practice that much these days. Very on and off. Sometimes I don't practice at all during a whole day. Sometimes I practice 8 hours in a day. But on an average, I would say 1.5 to 2 hours. That's an average. Sometimes when I have a new piece to work on, then I need to practice more. But I had a period of my life, 1 year, where I practiced from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Wow.
Yeah, so I said to myself, I was sitting in Stockholm. I had a house there, and I looked out the window and I saw my neighbor going to work. I'm not sure where he worked, maybe a margarine factory or something. And he went 8 o'clock in the morning, he went away, and he came back at 5 o'clock. And I said, why can't I do that? and I did that. I made the schedule that started at 8 o'clock in the morning. I went 20 minutes playing, 10 minutes break, 20 more minutes playing, and then 10 minutes break. So every full hour I would start, and every half hour. And I would do that for 3 hours, and then I would have a little, like a half an hour break, and I would start over again, do 2 more hours to have some lunch, and do 3 hours in the afternoon this way.
Wow.
And those 10 minutes of break that I have now and then, I would love a coffee, but I couldn't make it and drink it in the same break. So I had to make it in one break and then drink it in the next.
Wow.
And I would be so rigorous that I had a clock on the wall about this size. and I would have a second arm going like this. And at the minute I was sitting there waiting with the tuba, and I was watching this arm going up, and I said to myself, okay, I still got 3 more seconds before I need to start playing. And then poof, then I start.
Wow.
And the same thing, never stop even 1 second before the time is right, before you really have a pause.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was a very, very important year for me. Of course, if the Stockholm Philharmonic called and say, can you sub for us? Do you know what I answered?
What is it?
Well, I said, no, I'm busy practicing. So obviously I had to live really cheaply because I didn't take any gigs. So I cut down on cost like food. I ate onion and potato soup during the weekdays, and I had meat on Sundays. So, but it was kind of how can I put it? It's hard for musicians to feel happy and feel that they are, well, of course, musicians are happy now, but they don't feel happy about their practicing a lot. They very often feel like they should have practiced more.
Yeah.
And even when you sit down and watch a movie, at the end of the day, you feel, oh, have I really practiced enough today? There's this sneaking, almost devil that sort of tells you to go practice more, and you don't. Yeah. And you feel guilty all the time. Now, during this whole year, I felt totally fine, because I knew at 5 o'clock when I was done practicing, I had done what I could. There was no more like devil telling me in my ear, you should have done more, you should have done more. Yeah. And I could do whatever I liked after that, not going to the movie because that was too expensive, but I could at least watch TV, or I could go for a walk and not feel guilty. So recommended.
Yeah, so you sort of answered it, but I wanted to know if you ever thought what would it be like to be a full-time symphony musician? Has that crossed your mind? Have you ever?
Yeah, I've actually been a full-time orchestra musician for 2 years, and I've done a lot of subbing in the Stockholm Opera Orchestra and their National Symphony Orchestra, Stockholm Philharmonic. And I worked in the Norrköping Symphony Orchestra for 2 years. So I know a bit about how that feels. But that was before I was 23 years old. So, but the experience was that you sit there and count bars of rest. Like, you go, for example, if you play the Meistersinger opera, it's a famous tuba solo in the beginning. Well, it's not actually tuba solo. It's together with a bassist, dom, bom, 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 and so on. But after that, there's almost nothing for an hour. And then you just count and listen and watch. And then there is the end of the act, there's a little bit. And then you got the next act, same thing, couple of bars in the beginning, lot of waiting. And then you play some more. And I think I got tired of all this waiting. Oh. That's pretty much the reason. And also, you sit there and you watch the conductors. They interpret the music and they give the opinion. And that is, I hear from a lot of orchestra musicians, they disagree with what the guy in the front is doing, right? And they think, oh, if only I could have done it, right? I would have done it so much better, differently. And yeah, put your money where your mouth is when you quit and you become a conductor, or you quit and you become a soloist, because then you're absolutely 100% in charge of the music. So yeah, I guess it had to do with that too. I really wanted to be in charge.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that comes to mind, especially as a soloist, nerves. That's something that is really tough to overcome. And you've played with world-class orchestras all over the world. And as a soloist, how have you done it? And have you even ever had that problem of nerves and I'm nervous of getting on stage?
Yes, I've had that, and it's not fun. I can totally relate to people that feels nervous before they walk on stage. The reason, I just have to say that for me, it has become less bad over the years. And part of it might be age, that it doesn't really feel so important anymore. It's not a life or death situation where you feel that you almost put your whole life on the line for one concert. It doesn't feel like that anymore. It feels like, yep, it's important, but it's not that important. And also there are other things. For example, people are, I mean, if you look at it from the audience perspective, very, very few people go to a concert in order to hear a 100% perfect technically perfect performance. Most of the people that go to a concert just want to be entertained. They want to have a good time. They want to have to listen to music that sort of carries them through a story, so that they can feel enthusiasm and they can feel enriched and go home and go about with their lives in a better way the next day. So that's kind of what people want in the audience. And does a technically perfect performance without the heart, does that give you that? Well, maybe for some people. There are artists that have sort of put their whole name on being perfect. But for me, it's more about trying to tell a story. And of course, up to a certain point, it doesn't matter if you play a wrong note or two. I know Leif Ove Ansnes, very famous Norwegian piano player, he said that in the Grieg's A minor concerto, you should go through the whole concerto without playing more than 5 wrong notes. And just pick a number, right? If it's too much, obviously it's going to be disturbing. But if it's up to a certain point and you have a really convincing idea, then audiences are gonna let you away with a few mistakes here and there. So how was it Beethoven said that? Let me see if I can remember that quote. It's a really important one. Yeah, to play a few mistakes in a performance is forgivable, but to play without passion is unforgivable. I think it's something like that.
Yeah, you're right. Yes.
Yeah. So that has contributed this mindset, and also just getting a lot of training, playing a lot of concerts is really the way to do it. If you get to do a lot of concerts, you get training in being in that situation. And really, there's nothing you can do in order to prepare for a concert situation by just sitting in your home, except for just practicing hard. But this added stress that comes from being on the stage, that's really hard to emulate in your practicing room. There are ways, though. I'd like to mention a few ways you could do that. You could, for example, up the stakes by having, let's say, 10 coins on your table, and you play a phrase beautifully and as perfect as you can. And if you manage to do it the way you wanted it to be on the concert, then you move 1 coin over to the other side of your stand and you do it again. And you keep on moving coins until you have all the 10 coins moved. And that means you've done it perfectly. I'm not saying necessarily technically perfectly, but concert-like perfectly, 10 times in a row. And then you move on to the next phrase. You do the same thing. First time, move 1 coin, and so on and so on. If you do a mistake after coin number 7, you got to move all the coins back and start over again. So that's a really, really adds to the stress at home. Not totally as on the concert, but it helps. Yeah. And by doing that, you can prepare yourself a little bit. I know people who has put up posters of audiences' faces on their walls in the practicing studio, so they can sort of get used to seeing a lot of people in front of them. Now, not sure if that helps, but
yeah. And I was going to say, I had a guest previously that said that, sometimes the nerves, it's not so much about being nervous about the audience as it is about the orchestra that's there, accompanying you. And as a tuba player, you have another tuba player who's sitting out there and listening. So how much does that play into the nerves?
It's a lot about focus. Yeah. Really a lot about focus. If you focus on making the music as good as possible, then it's a lot easier. Yeah. But then sometimes that focus slips and you start thinking about, I got all of these fantastic brass players behind me. I really want to look good in there. ears, but that's kind of the wrong focus. So you have to work on your ability to shift focus.
Yeah. Well, you've talked about your career, but a life-changing moment in your musical career and a life-changing moment in your personal life, if you would like to share that, but you don't have to.
Oh, I wish I had a time to prepare that question, because that is, but there are quite a few actually when it comes to music.
Yeah.
If we talk about life-changing, I think listening to a recording of Roger Bobo and Harvey Phillips was kind of an eye-opener for me. Also Michael Lind. And it really, really opened my eyes to what could be done with a tuba. So that sounds maybe a little cliche, but it truly was an eye-opener. And then, of course, there are a bunch of different opportunities where I played with, for example, for people like Chick Corea, the piano player. I played with Clark Terry, a jazz trumpet player. I played a recording. We made a CD together, Subramaniam. He is a fantastic Indian violin player, and that's my latest CD. Also something that sort of blew my mind totally, and kind of, wow, this is next level. Yeah. And personally, outside of music, I gotta save that one for the next podcast. I'm not sure if I can. Well, yeah, obviously, doing my first solo flight as a pilot last year. That's I'm not sure if it's the pinnacle, but it's definitely something I'll remember for the rest of my life.
That's great. Well, advice to young musicians in general, or advice to brass or tuba players, if you want to be more specific?
In general, see yourself as someone that gives stuff to people. There's too little generosity and too little giving in music, and you hear it on a competition, for example, when the audience, when the performer is playing in order to get something. And this is a totally different attitude. You can tell if somebody's sitting there and he wants to have the admiration of the audience, is very, very self-conscious, and he wants to have a good grade maybe from the teachers. He wants to have a good a score from the judges. He wants the prize money, and it's all about what he can get as a musician. While music isn't about getting something, it's about giving, which is totally opposite. So the best advice I can give to young musicians is probably remember always to give when you're on stage.
Yeah.
And don't expect anything back. It's nice if people applaud and like it, but that shouldn't be the main goal. That's it.
That's amazing. I want to know about future projects. You don't have to say specific, but one thing maybe about your future project, but also even a bigger question, something that you haven't done, an artist you haven't collaborated with, that you absolutely have in your head and it hasn't happened, but you would like it to happen.
Yeah. I have collaborated with a lot of good musicians. And I think that's the way to develop as a musician, that you always surround yourself with people that are better than yourself at whatever they do. That's kind of my mantra. Let's see, people I would like to play with. I think Bela Fleck,
okay,
banjo player. He is just out of this world. I would love to play with him. That'd be fun. The projects that I'm having in my pipeline right now include recording, or actually we have a concert recording from 2016 where I do a live concert with a rock band. Mm-hmm. And this is the first, never told anyone this, so this is going to be a premiere on your podcast here, that there is a very good audio recording of this, and there's a very good live video recording of this concert. And I think, and this is all my songs, my compositions for tuba solo and rock band. And that's kind of in the pipeline. That's on the to-do list now.
Wow.
It's also during these times of Corona, I am working on doing some instruction videos. That's been in the pipeline for a long time, but now it's opened up a possibility of actually doing it. So I'm going to try to get that done the next month here.
What's one concerto that you've played with an orchestra and you just absolutely can't wait to go back to? If you had the chance, you want to play that one concerto.
Oh, that has to be Kalevi Aho concerto for tuba and orchestra. It's about half an hour long, I think. And it's just, that's the closest to a Shostakovich tuba concerto we can ever come, I think. Fantastic Finnish composer. For those of you who haven't heard anything about him, Kalevi Aho is probably one of the greatest symphonic writers in the Nordic countries these days. And he has a huge amount of symphonic music and symphonies also behind him. So yeah, that's always, I remember when I recorded that, after the recording, I was so physically and emotionally worn down because it sort of sucks all your energy out. So I was literally crying on the airplane on the way back. I was kind of, like this. And when I told Robert von Baar, who was the owner of the CD company that it was recorded on, he had the same reaction when he heard it. It was like, yeah, this is strong stuff. So recommend it.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. Do you have anything else you want to add or share before we end today?
Not except for just wishing everybody of my colleagues and not colleagues around the world best of luck in these times, and it will pass, but we have some time ahead of us before that happens, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an honor having you on, and hopefully in the future we'll do this in person, because it's always much better. Even though Zoom or Skype or any of these other platforms are great, but I think in person, nothing beats in person.
That's totally right.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
Pleasure. You too. Bye-bye.